Simon Dolan. He loves my city, and I'm so happy to welcome him to the stage. Big applause for Simon Dolan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I learned, over the years, you see I have a white beard, means that I have a few years of experience, that when you are a third speaker in almost any event that has something in common, you better not prepare any PowerPoint, because PowerPoint is going to be quite rigid, and you take always the risk that someone has talked already about some ideas that you wanted to share. So what I decided to do is to just have a direct talk with you about my experience and some of the conclusions that I reached throughout my travel across the world, across the globe. Fortunately, I speak a number of languages, so I meet people from Brazil, from Africa, in French, in Spain, in South America, and this accumulated knowledge helped me to adventure into whatever I want to share with you today. I consider myself to be a curious person. So the curriculum, it doesn't matter. You just go to www.simondolan.com and you can get to know me. As a very famous CEO told me the other day, I think that, never met you before. I know you more than your parents, because today everything is open, everything is digital. What I want to do with you today is take you to a journey that will last approximately 22, 23 minutes. It's not a lot, but I know that people that attend Supermind are open-minded, and you can do it fast. So what I'll do, I'll discuss many concepts, all connected to our general theme. I'll try to connect some of the dots. But today, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do everything to give you everything that you want to know. I also want to tell you that if you get in touch with the people in Supermind, you can get my PowerPoint presentation if you really insist on getting them. So please get in touch with them, and it's going to be readily available. I handed it over before even I came here. So let's first of all identify some of what we call the keywords. And the keywords are the following: values, culture, future, success. Obviously, I can add a couple of more words such as uncertainty. It has been dealt with. I can add the word leadership. It has been dealt with. And I will add, and I will insist on the word innovation. I also want to tell you that when we talk about the future, we cannot employ terms of the past, because we have to invent, we have to create new terms. I think about 20 years ago, I was one of the first person that I used the term culture reengineering. Basically, it meant, how do you change culture in an organization? And later on, I even reached the conclusion that culture doesn't exist. What do you mean culture doesn't exist? Well, when I talk about culture, I talk about shared values. So shared values means culture. So sometimes under different leadership style, you can find out the same organization and they have different subculture. All depends on the leader, all depends on the kind of team that you run, and so on and so forth. So if you want to culture re-engineer, you can culture re-engineer a team, a department, an organization, a community, and the entire world. Now that I'm in the last phase of my active thinking mode, I'm becoming more ambitious. So I'm becoming a little bit what we call in Spanish here, Don Quixote. I'm trying to change the world. I know that a lot of people are trying to do the same. But I'm going to insist on something that I will repeat throughout my presentation. If you want to change anything, doesn't matter what, including yourself, you need to have 3 legs. If you lack one of the 3 legs, you're not going to be very effective in changing. You need to have a concept, any concept, but not a concept that you understand, that you've developed. A concept that when you explain it, it sounds like music to the people to listen to it. Concept. Number 2, you need to have methodology. If you just have a concept, but you don't say how do you apply it, it doesn't take you very long. It's not sustainable. So the second leg is methodology. And the third one that we miss a lot when we talk about the future, when we talk about values, we talk about almost any concept, are tools. We need concept, we need methodology, we need tools. And I'd like to share with you what I've been doing in this regard. So, let me start the journey. And the journey, because we talk about succeeding. You can succeed as a person, and you can succeed as an organization, as a community, as a country. And it doesn't depend only on the leader. Obviously, the leader plays a very important role, but it depends on all of us, as we just heard, okay? So, let me talk a little bit about the notion of success. And I can tell you, when I was a doctoral student back in Minnesota, and by chance, I worked in the very famous hospital. It's called the Mayo Clinic. I got my PhD in Minnesota. And I started to think about the notion of success, what success means in life, not only at work. And success basically means, obviously today, is that you're going to live for many years, be happy, feel fulfilled, do something that is meaningful, and obviously do not get sick mentally or physically throughout this period. This is success. Because if you're very successful and you die prematurely, well, I wonder if you're a success. And if you go to any cemetery, you'll find out, a lot of grave, and it's written under it, here is buried a very successful executive. He amassed a lot of money, developed many companies, and he died at 45 years old. I don't think this is success, honestly. So what happened to me in the Mayo Clinic is that I analyzed about 300 people that survived their first heart attack. They thought that they were in perfect health. All of them were working. The youngest was about 27 years old, the oldest 77, so we have the range. This was not science at the time. This is very descriptive information. But then I came there at the surviving, fighting for the life. I was a doctoral student at that time. I was not even a full-fledged researcher. And I asked them, what do you think was the main reason for your situation? And what shocked me is that people connected it to the world of work. So I reached a conclusion that work can be very toxic. And today when I preach, I tell people, how do you identify toxic organization, toxic people, toxic environment, toxic community, toxic leader? And you know what? If you want to survive, get rid of them. Get rid of them or get away and do something else, because otherwise you're not going to survive. So this made me develop my first model of success, being trained in organizational psychology. I look at people health, I look at organizational health, and if you can imagine two-dimension model where if the organization, someone is productive, this is positive, someone is unproductive is negative, and on the personal level, if someone is not becoming sick, it's positive, and if someone becoming sick, it's negative. And then you can come up with, obviously, the win-win, that someone is productive and healthy, and the negative, which means unproductive and sick. But then we can have diagonal people that are very productive but will become sick mentally or physically, or people that in order not to become sick, they keep, they work like we said, I'm Canadian. In Canada, in the public sector, we call these people who work for the government at the time. I don't want to have any enemy in case someone is watching me right now. We call them 905, which basically meant they were so disillusioned with their work, they came to work at 9 in the morning, during the day they did 0, and they left work at 5 in the afternoon. That's very bad because the organization doesn't use all the talent that they had because they didn't know how to measure this talent because they surrounded themselves with bureaucracy, with rules, with the things that basically nobody wants to do it. Even animals do not get into routine. So I started a whole journey into understanding what is it there, the toxicity that is killing people. It has no color, it has no odor, exactly like the virus that we are having right now. It has no color, no odor, but it kills. And we're trying to know more about the virus. And we're trying to know more about the virus so that we can prevent it, we can intervene, we can help people. That's exactly what happened to me when I started my journey into the world of stress. And then a big person a big researcher back in Montreal, heard my presentation. He invented, I think, the word stress, but he came from medicine, invited me as a young researcher to work with him, and before he worked with animals, with mice, and I wanted to understand the physiological reaction to people that are stressed and why it's killing animals and I was the one that started the whole research about what happened to human being. Now, what you need to understand that the word stress has two meanings. It has an acute meaning that it's easy to detect, but it has also what we call chronic meaning, and the chronic meaning needed different type of tools, different type of approaches in order to detect it. And since then, we've published many books in many languages about stress, self-esteem, health, and work. And after I finished all this left me into something that has to do with values. I think that Franchon said before that reality really doesn't exist, but there is perceived reality that made us feel miserable or happy. How do we perceive what's happened to us is very, very important. So we started a whole journey in understanding our perception, and I decided to focus on the DNA of the perception, and I call it values. Many years ago, psychology thought that the best way to understand how people behave is to understand the needs, because needs connected to behavior. And it's still true, but I think it's true in acute situation and not so much in the field that I'm connected, this is work, because in work situation, it's not the need that counts, it's your values that counts. So the values are much better proxy of your behavior than your needs. Doesn't matter what my needs are, it's my values, my core values that govern my behavior. And if the values are shared, we can talk about the culture. And in a company, it's the culture, the shared values that can explain how and where and when people behave. So I started the journey into the field of values. But the word values are very, very, very generic. Everyone talks about value. Nobody tells me that they don't have values. And when I started my journey, when I used the word values, people thought that I talk about ethics. Economists thought that I talk about economic values. It has ethics, it has economics, it has much more than this. So I have a very nasty habit. When I don't know something, I create congress, I create conference, I create association. So back in the 70s, I co-founded the International Society for the Study of Work and Organizational Values, called ISVOV. Actually, it was also a political act to show that in that time, Europe was divided into East and West, and they didn't let scientists from the East to come to congresses, scientific congresses of the West. So what I decided to do, I decided to create this kind of organization. We only try to understand values from all the angles, all the methodologies in the world, and we came to the East. So for the almost 10 years, all the conferences of ISVOV were in Prague, in Budapest, and so on. And finally, what we understood when you talk to the Chinese, when you talk to the Czech and the Polish, you see the people are people. Regimes, government are different, but people are people. And people are people, and they will work together when there is a real crisis. And we don't need to wait the crisis, to see a crisis coming from another out of space. We have the kind of crisis that we live in this universe that unites us all. We have no place to escape. If we think that we are going to escape to an island in the Caribbean, it's a temporary escape, but we're still in the same planet. That's not an escape. Very few people would escape our planet. But what we need to do right now is create, and here I'm going to connect to sustainability, the kind of planet that we're going to be healthy and happy. Now, I know this is utopia. So let me just tell you why I think that this utopia has some reason, and we can work very closely to bring it as close as we can to reality. So in the 70s, 80s, there were hundreds of articles about values. I myself became the editor-in-chief of a journal. It's called Cross-Cultural Management. It's all about comparing management in different cultures. So I learned a lot from this experience. I think it was an amazing experience. I also left North America after I became full professor there, and I came to Spain, to a business school, to learn that whatever I was brainstorming in the United States, that only empirical data is research, and all of a sudden I discovered it in Spain, qualitative research is also research, and it can add a lot of values. Obviously, I used a hybrid model because I was trained in mathematics, statistics, and then I combined very rich qualitative data, maybe to understand phenomena better. So, what we did is that I got a chair in ESADE. ESADE is a business school in Barcelona, and they asked me, what you're curious about today? So I said, I'm curious about tomorrow. And what do you know about tomorrow? I said, nothing. I just want to study tomorrow, and I don't know. Maybe we can help by detecting some elements, some trends that will help people prepare a little bit for the unprepared. So in 2008, if I'm not mistaken, I wrote my first book that is half fiction and half science. It's called Beyond Society, Organization and Society in Transformation. I understood that we are in transformation. And over there, we did a lot of prediction. 2008. Please go back if you want to read, and it's available in different languages, Beyond, Mario Reich and Simon Dolan, and you find out that we predicted a pandemic. We didn't know it's going to be this pandemic, but it was all predicted. We predicted nuclear explosion. It happened in Japan, we didn't know. We predicted immigration crisis. And we predicted some other things that if you want, partially it happened, partially it may happen. Simply by doing some systemic analysis about some trends and some hypotheses about maintenance, about conflict. Today, we predicted there, and unfortunately, I can predict even more that even terrorism will change. Because before, wars needs to be won by a large military, a lot of people, very labor intensive. Today, no. Today, very few people can cause a lot of damage to the entire world, and we should worry about it. And some new industries, by the way, talking about the future of work, will develop because we will have to prevent them. We don't want a terrorist to put some poison in the water source of a big city and have the entire people in the city die just by drinking water. So, nanotechnology and terrorism will have a new dimension. Again, we predicted it, but I'm optimistic. I'm very optimistic. I think that the human race will surpass all the evil forces, and eventually we are going to win. The same thing I said about the pandemic. I'm not a medical doctor, but during the pandemic, I felt like I need to contribute my experience as a researcher in trying to incite researchers that know more about the subject to change the paradigm. It's a paradigm break. That's what I'm good. So I told them, why don't you try to develop in parallel new type of research that doesn't focus only on disease, which is the traditional way to understand, to isolate, but focus on health. Find out why some people do not get infected, why some people have the resilience. Why don't we understand resilience? Can help a lot. Because resilient nurses and doctors will not contract the COVID-19, the virus, working in hospital. Others may. So if you want, it's still on the net. Look at Simon Dolan and look at resilience, and it's free because I don't do any promotion to any one of my writing. I feel uncomfortable doing it. But as a change agent, as a transformation agent, you need to be equipped with information that you can read, assess, and then you say, I take this one and I reject this one. It's totally, I am in agreement. So, my values brought me to take the universe, because there are thousands of values, and all of them are very important. But I came to the conclusion that we can segment, we can classify the entire universe of values into 3 axes. I'm talking about axes, I'm not talking about dimension. And they need not be symmetric, they're not symmetric. So a lot of research, and in my books I explain what is the triaxial model of values. You take any universal values and you can identify values connected with the economy, those are economic pragmatic values, values connected with the rules of the game, we call them the ethical and social axis, and the third one, and I'll come back to it because I think it's the most important, and those are emotional values. So what we need to understand when we want to understand culture, when we want to understand individuals, is to understand the configuration of these three axes that has for the person and for the community, for the organization, even for the people you live with. Because if they are far away and the configuration is not similar, not identical, but similar, I'm talking about configuration of values and not specific values, then it's not going to be sustainable. So for the last 15, 20 years, what I did, I tried to understand this configuration. And I wrote some books about it. When I wrote books about culture in organization, most of my books, by the way, the subtitle is even more important than the title. So if the book was called Managing by Values, obviously, it's a philosophy of management that explains why managing by instructions used to be the past, managing by objective used to be past and present, and in the future, we're going to manage by values. And the dynamics is different, because in a managing by values, you move because you want to move, not because someone tells you to move, or someone pays you in order to move. You move because you want to move. So this is managing by values. But the subtitle of the book is called Corporate Guide to Living, Being Alive, and Making a Living in the 21st Century. Obviously, it's a very big title. And if in the book I would not suggest something specific, a methodology and tools how to do it, then I didn't do any contribution. Years later, I decided to apply my knowledge that I know about organizations to individual people, because the worst enemy, and I met leaders all over the world, big people with a lot of money, large corporation, and I found out that their major enemy is themselves, because they are succeeding and they have a lot of economic pressure, and they don't want to change. They're afraid to change. It's the fear of changing. They are in what we call the comfort zone. And getting out of the comfort zone, what do you need? You need a crisis. A crisis makes you think, makes you reflect. But it's not the best moment to take a decision about strategic transformation change. Think about yourself as a person right now. When is the time that you really reflected about life? Because what do we do in our life? We are caught into routine and dynamic. We wake in the morning, we have kids, and we go to work, and we work, and then we go vacation, to end up where? In the grave. We're going to, one thing is sure in our life. I call it, we live in a sandwich zone. Why sandwich? Because we were brought to this world against our will. Someone decides for us. And we will depart from this world also against our will. So what happened in between depends a lot on ourselves. Not on some other people, not on chances. It's our awareness of what is really important to us and how can we live day to day what is important to us. So I moved into the field of coaching. And I've developed communities because I know that I'm not a very effective manager. I'm not an effective manager. So I needed to work with people that will help me bring and diffuse the information. So we created the Coaching by Values community, the Leadership by Value communities, and I trained them so that they can train other people, and they train other people by far better. We also developed some tools, and I'll talk about the tools later on. And today, I feel myself that I'm in the middle between someone that has ideas and wants to maintain the academic rigor that I was trained, but without fear, bring it to the people that are in action. And because I'm not as good as doing it myself, I need to use proxies, socios, other people that can do by far a better job. So I wrote in 2011 a book. It's called Coaching by Values. And coaching by value, again, it's very similar to managing by values applied to the individual, when the individual wants to find out what's important for me in my life. Why should I wait for a crisis to evaluate what's important? No. I should be trained in identifying my configuration of values, and then someone needs to teach me, help me, if I cannot do it myself, live my values in a day-to-day. If you are able to do it, then you have a compass. We, in this world, we are people in the search of what I call double compass. I didn't get to the second compass yet. I'll come to it. This is to find out how do we fit into the new world, into Tomorrowland. But first of all, we need to know what's important to us and how do we live our life. How meaningful we live our life, not before we get sick and we die. So the subtitle of Coaching by Values 2011 was called How to Succeed in Business. No, how to succeed in the world of business and the business of life. It's playing with words, but basically means it's not only to succeed in your professional work, but also succeed as a person. And as a person, you want to add value. So we are doing it. And how do we do it? Well, I've developed something because you have to think out of the box. And thinking out of the box is not easy. Why? Because being creative, and I'll talk about creativity in a second because creativity has been mentioned systematically by the two other speakers, and I completely agree with them. I don't know how to train people to be more creative. Some people believe that they can train them, but I know that creativity means being, taking risks. You have to be a risk taker. So when I've developed my first tool, it's a card game. It's a card game that people play, and using gamification principles, you can identify your values. I was very, very criticized because people that didn't like it, they said, listen, he's developing educational games and he doesn't have a PhD in education. It's an old professor that now decided all of a sudden to go to the gaming. And I took my risk because I believe in it, and I'm very passionate about it. And passion, as I will say throughout my presentation, is the only thing that is sustainable in this life, okay? So you need to maintain your passion. When my colleagues in a good business school, colleagues that are expert in marketing, in finance, they ask me, you spend so much money producing this kind of card, how are you going to sell them? I told them, I don't know. How do you go into marketing? I said, I don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? I said, well, I'll find some other people that love to do it, they know how to do it, and they'll also make some money. I want them to make. All my partners, by the way, and I have many partners across the globe, they make much more money than I do. And I'm very happy, because that's what you do. You compensate them for doing, but they bring it to the world. They bring it to the world, and today, for example, Coaching by Value became a school of thought within the field of coaching. It took us about 10 years together, recognized by the International Federation of Coaching and so on and so forth, International Coaching Federation. It doesn't matter. What I'm saying is that it took my partners to bring it. Now, what's my take is that I've developed a compass for people to understand what's important. And I get hundreds of messages, which, by the way, I answer each one of them, okay? From people who said, listen, you changed my life. You changed my life. I took the 2.5 days or 3 days or 5 days, not with me even. It's amazing. Because the only thing that we offer people is to develop their own compass. In the world that is VUCA, and VUCA has been mentioned a lot, that is uncertain, what do we need? We need to have some compass to know how. When you have your internal compass, it doesn't matter what happened outside. You know what to do. It doesn't matter what the politician said. It doesn't matter even what the scientist says. You have your own compass. Your own compass also is your conscience, and you do whatever you think you should do. And then we have a beautiful phrase in Italian, in Spanish, called "que sera, sera," whatever happen, happen. Listen, we cannot avoid death. We will die one day. But at least we will die smiling, okay? It will get us to the point of smiling. So, this is the world of values. So we develop internal. And then I ask myself, what about the external environment? We don't live in a vacuum. What about the world? What about the world, how it's changing? How do you prepare people to the new world? Now, I was a very popular professor in my business school, and I became almost the enemy. I became the enemy because I said, and I'm not afraid to say it, that business school and academics in general are not prepared to the new world. You know, already my predecessor talks about the elementary and secondary education, the PISA. We're not prepared. We need to do a big leap in order to prepare, and the COVID indirectly help us a little bit. But it's not just the fact that we use, virtual technology. There is much more. It's a mindset, mind transformation, more than just the digital part of it, and I'll talk about it in a second. So, how do we prepare to this new world? We need some sort of compass. We have the internal one, but we need to prepare ourselves to what is coming. So what I said, 3 things. Number 1, the academic institution that I lived and helped them even get top ranking are not prepared for tomorrow, and they become arrogant because they don't want to change. The same thing, they're in the comfort zone. They said, we're good, let's not change. Talk about football, Barca. They're good, no change. No change, look what happens. We need to change, we need to take the risk of changing. Otherwise, we will not sustain the kind of high motivation for people to be at the top, because you get, I would say, tired of success. The US got tired of success. They used to be the leader in technology. The Chinese are not. They have a lot of appetite. They want to beat the US, the Japanese, other people in the world, and they will do it. When I was in a doctoral program in the United States, 50% of my colleagues were Chinese or Korean, Asiatic. Now they don't want to come because they teach them something that is already old. Relatively, let me not just be so critical. So, number 1, I said academic institutions are not prepared. Politicians are not prepared. So I decided we need to educate the politician. We need, because they need to be educated like anyone else. And corporate leaders are not prepared. And that's why 3 years ago, I left the chair that I have in ESADE. I left my comfort zone of drawing a very high salary as a full professor, as a chair, and I co-founded the Global Future of Web Foundation that is housed here in Barcelona, actually in Valkiria, and I want to thank Yolanda for believing in me and some other people, and we created a foundation. Foundation is a think tank. We don't know where we are heading to. But what's wrong in having a debate? What's wrong about speculating? What's wrong about trying to educate politicians, government officials, academics, and corporate leaders, prepare them for the future? In 2014, I wrote with Mario Reich and a third person that is she's considered to be Rianne Eisler, one of the paradigm breaker in the US. A book is called Cyberness, the Future Reinvented. With my level of optimism, I'm sick and tired of talking about the end of the world. I want to give people reason to dream. And how do you dream? How do you dream? A dream is an extension of our experience. But how do you dream about something that is not part of your experience? So we wanted to create a dream. The dream is, and we call it cyberness. Cyberness, by the way, it's not cyber age, because we had to invent new term. A new term, cyberness, basically means positive future. This gives people a way to dream. Now, I also did a lot of work for the European Commissioner, trying to understand how employment will look in Europe in 2050. And I have to admit, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a prophet, but I can extrapolate from what happens now into what might or might not happen in the future. And the three major macro tendencies are happening in the future. And you need to look at the configuration of this macro trend. Number one, the world will become much more global, which means that, and look at the epidemic, look at the pandemic, frontiers are becoming useless. We don't, we have no frontiers. Today, I have my programmers that work on some application we develop, and they're in Bangladesh, and I've never met them. The whole transaction was, here is what we need, here is what you need, here is how you're going to pay us, and we're going to develop the product, and if you don't like what we develop, don't pay. I mean, what a better offer can you get from people that you don't know? Everything is virtual. And if I like the product, whatever I pay them is going to be about a third of the price cost that I would have paid in my own city, because cost of living is much higher here. Okay? So you're experimenting. So globalization is one of them. I encourage you to look a little bit about how we look at the future. In some of the articles, not books, that we publish in the European Business Review, we publish about 3-4 articles every year, and I say it because if you're interested in what I'm saying, go and read it by yourself, and it's free, so that I don't feel like I'm marketing or making something commercial, except that I don't have enough time to broaden and to get into details. Number one, the world is becoming global, digital, virtual, and many of us will work in this virtual world. No frontiers. Number two, and this is very important, the world, not only that is global, it's also digital. So it's globalization on one hand, digitalization on the other hand, and the third one is something the world needs more creative people. And creativity means that you develop a product, you make some money, but already you have to think about the next product and the next product, and it's a never-ending story. You have no choice. Because if you develop a good product, someone else can develop identical product cheaper, and that's it, and you're out of business. That's what happened to cell phone. I can give you, when I talked to Steve Jobs back in the '85, and I met him in Boston, he didn't even dream about inventing the iPhone. In 1985, when I was professor at Boston University, he only talked about the magic of the Macintosh, and he talked about, how it was developed, the team, and all. And later on, some other thing. The moment of inspiration comes. So you need to be creative, and you need to try to innovate. And innovation, by the way, I use an example that you all understand what are the risks of innovation and creativity. It's like the pendulum. The pendulum, when you move the pendulum a little bit, it moves a little bit, but you take very small risk. When you start to move a pendulum vigorously, the distance between sheer innovation and sheer stupidness is very close. So basically, you have to take the risk of some people say that you're stupid. Don't worry. I think that if your self-esteem is high enough, you should go with your competence and with your passion, and there is no end to wherever you get. I am with you today. I'm over 70 years old. I don't know how many more years I'm going to work, but I can tell you I wake up every morning with a passion to set up alliances. If you look at some of my books, by the way, this is a little bit commercial. My latest book, which is called The Secret of Leading and Coaching by Value, is coming up only on the 23rd of July. So I'm happy to see it, It's by Routledge. Routledge is a big international UK company. But some of the things that I'm talking about, and I don't make the money, in real publishing world, it's the publisher that makes all the money, and we get only small royalties. But I think the content is there. Let me just bring it all to an end, okay? We live in the world that we need double compass. We need internal compass. I talk about value, but I also tell you, how do you detect them? How do you measure them? And how do you convert them into mode of behavior? Number two, we are in a search for detecting an external compass, and you will hear a lot of speculation about how the world will look like tomorrow. And the day after tomorrow, it will look different from the day after tomorrow, because we are not in a simple line of evolution. We're going to have a lot of jumping. So thank you for being with me. Thank you for inviting me to Supermind and taking the risk of having someone that, because they didn't know what I'm going to say, but I thank you for the risk, and I hope that you enjoy the presentation.